My friends, it's good to be with you at your triennial convention. Yes, in my hometown of St. John's. I grew up about 20 minutes from here in a little community called Rabbittown, and I am proud to say I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. And I want to acknowledge, of course, the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothic, whose cultures have been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothic and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Innu and Inuit. And I am grateful for the opportunity to meet here and acknowledge the historical oppressions of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada. And we walk the path of healing and the decolonizing journey we all share together. And yes, my friends, your convention builds upon the powerful activism of the past months, where we concluded the largest strike in Canadian history. And we fought and we won fair wages and improved working conditions for more than 155,000 federal public sector workers. My friends, this victory is thanks to you. I am grateful to each and every one of you who answered the call and helped mobilize over 150,000 members from coast to coast to coast. And we are a stronger union today because of your activism, and I want to thank you. But let's be clear, your willingness to put everything on the line and fight for a new contract for yourself and your fellow workers is the true meaning of solidarity. You demanded better from your employer, and you achieved this goal. I know that the strike was difficult for all of you. Strikes always are. But you kept the line strong and to support your bargaining teams and your incredible solidarity and determination during the strike. Your bargaining teams thank you, and I thank you for this achievement. We needed your solidarity and activism to push the employer to drop their concessions and bargain meaningfully. In all the years I've been involved in bargaining, I've never seen an employer so complacent, so unwilling to negotiate. There was absolutely no urgency from this government to get to a deal. They dragged their feet and pushed back on every reasonable bargaining demand we put on the table. They refused to give an inch unless we levied every ounce of our collective bargaining power. And we got their attention when and only when we served strike notice. And it took the largest strike in Canadian history to really get them to move. It wasn't easy, but we achieved important gains together. In the end, we negotiated fair wages totaling a minimum of 12.6% compounded over the life of the agreement. And this does not include numerous group-specific wage adjustments that we negotiated across all tables. We also secured a pensionable $2,500 one-time lump sum payment, which represents an additional 3.7% of salary for the average Treasury Board member. We obtained other gains that have long-term benefits for our members. A joint committee to review the existing training courses related to employment equity, diversity, and inclusion. Increased protections for public service jobs, which will reduce contracting out. And gains on securing seniority rights in the WFA process. This is your victory, and I hope you see the hard work and dedication reflected in these collective agreements. And I know there were some frustrations and disappointments from this round of bargaining and the strike. Members' expectations rose during the duration of the strike. And of course, we don't always achieve everything that we want in every round of bargaining. We're currently surveying our Treasury Board and CRA members so that we can learn from this experience and build on the successes achieved in the upcoming negotiations. Our success isn't only measured by what we won at the bargaining table, but it's also about showing strength, sending a message, and setting the stage for future negotiations by our members and by workers across the country. We have set the bar for what the future of work looks like, and we will continue to advance this demand in upcoming negotiations. And we did this despite the Federal Public Service Labor Relations Act, that governs our bargaining process. The legislation does nothing but complicate the process and prevent unions from settling bargaining quickly and effectively. Our bargaining process can take years to reach a deal, while in other jurisdictions, it can get done in months. For example, when negotiations break down, we're required to make our case before a public interest commission or a PIC, before we can pressure the employer with potential strike action. This isn't required in other jurisdictions, and as you well know, the PIC process can take months, and the recommendations are not even binding. And it almost never brings the two sides closer to a deal. It simply just delays the process. And it's time that we make changing the legislation a top priority for our union, and we plan on doing that. Our bargaining process needs to be governed by legislation that does not give the employer the upper hand each and every round of bargaining. My friends, as I said, our achievements were not only at the bargaining table, but we built a stronger union for years to come. A whole new generation of PSAC activists were born on those picket lines. I met with hundreds of members who were participating in a union activity for the very first time. Their energy and activism will help strengthen locals across our union. And the challenge to all of you will to find ways to build on that. We now have hundreds of activists who have gained experience as picket captains and now know how to mobilize a crowd and move to action. Tens of thousands of RAND members have signed their union cards and are now better connected to their union. And we have doubled the amount of contact information we have for our members in every corner of the country. Because of this strike, we are now a more powerful union, and we have advanced our movement and the labor movement. Again and again, we have proven that when we come together, we are a force that cannot be ignored, and we will need to maintain our collective solidarity to face the challenges on the horizon. And one group of workers in our union, in your component, need some of that collective solidarity, and they need it now. Every day, non-public fund workers provide vital programs and services to Canadian Forces members, veterans, and their families. And yet, despite this, they remain some of the lowest paid public service workers in the country, and this is nothing but shameful. The Valcartier, Montreal, St. Jean, Bagotville bargaining units are at the PIC process this week, and Kingston and Petawawa will be joining them in the coming weeks. These workers are fighting for a simpler salary scale, access to benefits for part-time employees, and retroactive pay for all members, including retirees and former workers. And they are fighting for fair wages. They are fighting for fair wages that keep in line with the core of federal public service, so we can tackle once and for all the long-standing problem of inequitable wages. And friends, it needs to go one step further than that. We need non-public fund members to be finally part of the core public service where they belong. We must also use our power to have governments fulfill their promises to workers. Affordable, accessible childcare must continue to be rolled out across Canada. The Liberals must follow through with their dental and pharmacare promises they made through the confidence and supply agreement with the NDP. The Liberal government has also promised anti-scab legislation, and we're fed up waiting for it. This legislation would end the union-busting practice of hiring replacement workers during strikes, which hurts unions' bargaining power and weakens workers' rights. We saw this tactic used against our grain inspector members during the Treasury Board strike, and was viciously used against our 13 Iqaluit Housing Authority members, almost all of them Inuit, who were on strike for 134 days because the employer was allowed to hire replacement workers from the South and actually paid them more to scab. It is indeed a shame. And employers cannot be allowed to deny workers their right to strike effectively. And our union will continue to put public pressure on Seamus O'Regan and the Liberals to get this done. Friends, we must maintain our pressure on this current government to keep its promises. This includes acting on the recommendations outlined in Louise Arbour's external review. There must be an end to the misogyny, discrimination, sexual violence, and trauma that continues to exist within the military, and that our members and other civilian workers are subjected to. Acting on the report recommendations must, however, include engaging PSAC and UNDE as representatives of these workers in military workplaces. And I'm really happy that former UNDE member Bonnie Robichaud has been invited to your convention, and I look forward to seeing her during your convention. In 1980, Bonnie's complaint of sexual harassment was the first to be referred to a human rights tribunal by the Canadian Human Rights Commission. And it resulted in a landmark Supreme Court of Canada decision that made employers responsible for maintaining a safe, respectable, and harassment-free workplace. It was a decision that changed the lives of women who have faced discrimination and harassment at work. Bonnie led the way. It was a difficult and grueling 11-year fight for her, and I have the utmost respect and admiration for her courage and determination. And we must remain vigilant and determined in holding employers to account, and this includes the Canadian government and the Canadian Armed Forces. As reported in the Globe and Mail last week, the new Minister of Treasury Board, Anita Anand, has directed her colleagues to provide her with the approved cuts by the budget by October the 2nd. We have not been consulted on this government's review of public services, nor the $15 billion in the proposed cuts. As we said when the federal budget was released, you can't cut $15 billion in public service budgets without cutting services to Canadians or the jobs of the workers who provide those services. You can't cut $7 billion in contracted out services without reinvesting that money into the public service and not reduce service delivery to Canadians. And we recommended in our submission to the government for the pre-budget consultations for 2024, the government needs to pause these cuts until it has concluded a whole-of-government review of staffing and services needed, and to do it with bargaining agents involved, and we must be involved through the entire process. Over the last year, we have repeatedly heard that the government has no staffing plan, can't fill vacancies, and has a recruitment and retention problem. It is time that the government work with bargaining agents to prioritize the needs of communities by ensuring that public service staffing meets the real objective demand for programs and services. We have also had to keep the pressure up, and we have to prepare for the potential threat of a new government who will not be kind to workers nor unions alike. My friends, if you've been paying attention to the polls, if an election were to be called soon, we very could end up with a conservative government. For those of you who might not have been around the last time the Conservatives were in power, let me remind you of the damage that was done by Stephen Harper. The Conservatives cut 26,000 public service jobs in less than 4 years. They closed 9 Veterans Affairs offices. They tried to remove sick leave from our collective agreements. They cut $2.6 billion in public spending to reduce science-based agencies like the CFIA and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And they reduced the staff at Service Canada and ESDC by 24%. They cut our public services, and all of the cuts, of course, hurt our communities across the country. And finally, the Conservatives laid off departmental compensation advisors and launched the disastrous Phoenix pay system. The depth of the destruction is too long to recount here, but we do remain impacted by the Harper error. The Phoenix pay system is still plagued with errors, and they are growing every day. The backlog of pay problems has now reached over 436,000 cases, the highest number we've seen since 2019. Our members paid a heavy price the last time the Conservatives were in power, and it will not be any different under Pierre Poilievre. He was handpicked by Stephen Harper to lead the Conservative Party, and Poilievre will rush to finish what Harper started. My friends, we must stay informed and mobilized and ready to to use our collective power to elect governments that work for workers. Much of the work UNDE members do, and that all public sector workers do, is not often visible, nor to the public, nor is it given the accolades you deserve. But I thank you, and your union thanks you. The dedication and pride you take in your work benefits all Canadians and makes your union proud. We know that when the Canadian Armed Forces are mobilized to support Canadians, whether during the early days of COVID or in a response to other emergencies such as the climate change caused wildfires and flooding, that you are there in the background, providing the support needed, and I thank you for that. And yes, the military has had more requests for support over the last few years, and I think that is only going to increase because we are in the midst of a climate crisis. The World Meteorological Organization has confirmed that July was the hottest month on record globally, and 2023 was the third warmest year to date at 0.43 degrees Celsius above the recent average. A record year of devastating wildfires has affected nearly every part of the country, just as they have around the world, from China to Maui to Greece. And in the last week, the city of Yellowknife was evacuated. Many PSAC, Union of Northern Worker members, were on the front lines, supporting the relief efforts across the territory, from firefighters to healthcare workers, United Way emergency response teams, and many more. And we are indebted to them for their service. The same thing happened just a few days ago in Kelowna. My friends, what we're seeing in this country is a total devastation. And for those who say we're not in a climate crisis, they really need to give their heads a shake. The world's oceans also set a new temperature record, raising concerns about the impacts on the planet's climate, marine life, and coastal communities. The temperature of the ocean surface rose to 20.96 degrees Celsius on July 30th. Record high global air temperatures and global ocean surface temperatures have dire consequences for both people and the planet exposed to ever more frequent and intense extreme events. The extreme heat experienced in many parts of the world is consistent with what scientists have been predicting for years. The increase to the Earth's global temperature will increase the risk of triggering climate tipping points with even greater human impacts. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres cautioned last month that the era of global warming has ended and the era of global boiling has arrived. This evidence shows the urgency for ambitious efforts to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, which are the main driver behind these records. Tackling the contributing factors of the climate crisis is a job for all of us. We must bring our collective solidarity and power towards advancing solutions, and this includes pushing our government and employers to take action. We have taken some action within PSAC, but it's nowhere near enough. Our Thirsty for Justice and the Lunada Food Justice campaigns make the connection between human rights, the environment, colonialism, and the political choices of our governments. Indigenous communities are some of the most harshly impacted by environmental racism. Communities that have experienced environmental racism for generations can face long-term intergenerational health impacts, such as increased rates of cancer, autoimmune diseases, or neurological impacts. And access to clean water and affordable food is a human right. And I know that many of you are working in your communities to raise the linked issues of water, food, and the environment, and I urge you to maintain this activism. My friends, before I conclude, I just want to give a very heartfelt thank you to your component president, June Winger. June has always been very insightful, very thoughtful, and very progressive at the National Board of Directors, and she has no problem raising the concerns of the UNDE members with me at any time, including at the board. My friends, I want to wish you a very happy and productive convention. These things don't just happen. You just didn't show up in St. John's and it was like, oh, look, the hotel got the room ready for us. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes into this. And I cannot thank your national office staff enough for putting on this convention, because it is a lot of work. My friends, just let me conclude by saying if we continue to work together and show our solidarity, we can build the world that we want. Again, I wish you a great convention, and finally let me leave you with this. Search the landfill. Thank you. Have a great convention.